I think it's about being out of control. Like if you don't have these things in place and you're not confident as to what the documents say or that you've covered off and everything, kind of in the unknown with the law. And often you can maybe even think you're in a worse off position than you are because you just don't know.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5. And I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues. This week I am joined by Jennifer Tutty from Studio Legal. Hi Jennifer, how are you?
Hi, I'm really great, thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I love to start each of our dialogues by finding out what can you see out your window today?
Well, my office is in the heart of Prahran in Melbourne. And I'm very lucky to have a north-facing office with all glass and a balcony, but today it's very cloudy. So usually the sun streams in, but a great working day in Melbourne today, so can't complain.
Beautiful. Sounds like, as a Sydney-sider, what I think of as a typical Melbourne day.
Yeah. We actually had really hot weather, but it's up and down at the moment. So
yeah. So you're obviously a lawyer, so a little bit different from one of our normal creative guests, but I would love to find a little bit about your business and how you've gotten to where you are today. Studio Legal, for anyone who doesn't know, is a law firm that specialises in the creative industry. So everyone from musicians, interior designers, architects, all of us in the creative world. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, you've done really well at describing us. So Studio Legal was born in 2011. So I think that makes us around 12 and a half years old.
Yeah.
So I have a background in entertainment and music law. And then when I had my first child, I decided to open up my own practice and decided to broaden my the industries that I worked with into the broader creative industry. So as you said, working with exciting industries such as architecture, interior design. We have lots of marketing and advertising agencies, clients in the fashion industry, media, podcasting, and then business startups, tech startups. So it's a really dynamic set of clients. And I just myself, I feel like I am a lawyer, but I'm also probably more of a creative at heart. Play music and have DJ'd a lot, and also really love interior design. So actually joke that if I had my time again, I probably would have preferred to have an interior design practice.
Oh wow.
But here I am.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good place to be.
Yeah, nice. And you have offices in Sydney and Melbourne.
Our bigger office is in Melbourne. We're building out our Sydney office at the moment with more team members. Yeah. And we represent clients, across all capital cities and even rural areas in Australia. Yeah, so it's very, with the internet, we don't need to necessarily meet. And obviously COVID just no one really needs to meet anymore in person. So makes us quite accessible.
Oh, very, very cool. Okay, so now creatives are not the best at knowing kind of, where we should do legal documents and all of that kind of stuff. And I would even hazard a guess that there are some interior designers listening to this who are going to get the cold sweats at the thought of talking to a lawyer and what documents are they talking about and all of that kind of stuff. But as someone who runs their own business, and I am very fortunate that I have a father-in-law who's a solicitor who is constantly like, have you got that? And have you got that? And you've got that. And I'm like, know what exactly is that you are talking about.
Yeah.
What are some of the key things that someone who is starting out their own studio, what are some of those key documents that they should have in place before they've even signed their first client?
Yeah, okay, this is a really great question. Um, so I think one of the most important documents that should really be created from the start is a really solid client agreement.
Yeah.
So like there are options for interior designers to find something on the internet or create their own. And I definitely respect that sometimes at the start of setting up a business, funds are really low. And, you know, you sort of just pull together what you can. And I've certainly done that in my own business. I just really do think, though, that if you're going to set up an interior design business, you really need to be putting aside like a couple of $1,000s for a really solid client agreement, which sets out the terms and conditions upon which you'll service your clients. So this would be created as a template. So there'd be like the body of the agreement would have all the relevant terms that you'll work with your clients, and then attached would be like the proposal document or a brief, or interior designers will have their own terms to how they describe it. So for each project that would be filled out with the client details and like the scope of work, the project address, what they're going to be required to do, the fees, like time commitment, deadlines, and then that would sort of be the proposal document, and that can be quite pretty. Like a lot of interior designers get, and I get this because I like pretty documents too. They just think that like contracts are so dry and boring and ugly, and how could their clients possibly sign them? But yeah, what I think works really well is like a beautifully designed proposal document or brief document for the project, and then attached to that is the contract or the terms and conditions. So the client's kind of like, by the time they get to the terms and conditions at the end, they're sort of comfortable that they know what's going on and they'd be prepared to sign that. So yeah, that client services agreement is really important. I do find that interior design is actually it's quite a tricky area. There's lots of risk, as I'm sure you're aware. There's lots of laws that impact interior designers. One of them is the Australian consumer law. So there's a lot of rules around like pricing and giving refunds and like consumer guarantees and like manufacturers' warranties. There's so much that sort of impacts interior designers. So, you know, when you hire a lawyer to get your contract right, you make sure that the contract doesn't, you know, your terms don't contradict your obligations at all, because you can actually get in quite a lot of trouble if you like misrepresent your customer's rights or so by hiring a lawyer to help with that document, you'll make sure you're not you're on the right side of the law. There's also like new laws recently just came in. You can't have unfair contract terms in your contracts if they're standard form contracts. So directors can have, you know, really large financial penalties if they put those in. Not to mention intellectual property and how interior designers need to be careful dealing with their intellectual property rights with customers. You certainly don't want to be giving over all your IP to a customer on one job when you need to be retaining that for other clients. So you can really trip up, interior designers can trip up on IP in contracts if they're not drafted correctly or according to their needs. So yeah, I just can't really harp on enough about a really good client agreement. So that would be the first one. If you're going to do anything, I would say that. Now, the second one I'd probably move to would be if you're hiring any person as a contractor to provide services to your business. So, for example, you might hire a drafts person, or you might hire a freelance designer to help with, you know, some overflow work. But they're not employed; they're just hired as a contractor. Or a freelancer is often another word for a contractor. So, yeah, getting a contract in place with those people is really important as well, because, for example, they would retain their intellectual property they create for you on a project. So copyright, for example, has to be transferred in writing and signed by the person who created the copyright in the first place. So you know, you really like, and then if you're required to give IP rights to your client and you haven't got them from your contractors, that can be a really big problem, especially when you're working for big developments or big clients. So yeah, that would be my second document. So that's a contractor agreement.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have terms and conditions in writing with suppliers. So maybe that's a joiner or like a tile company or a tab company, just outlining like, you know, the rules around getting products for a project. And sometimes, or probably most of the time, they should, the supplier should have their own contract, but, you know, making sure you actually read what it says, and thinking about who's liable for any like defects, and is the supplier contract a contract between your client and the supplier, or is it a contract between your business as the interior designer and the supplier? Because you've got to think about, like who's the contract between the suppliers, and if you're going to be contracting the suppliers on behalf of your clients, that means that you're actually going to be liable to your clients for the acts and omissions of suppliers. So if they deliver something that's faulty, or, you know, something goes wrong with a product, you're going to be on the hook with your client. So yeah, that's the third document that you need to be thinking about. And then employment contracts, if you have employees, are really important. Although I still think a contractor agreement first, because at least with employees, at law, they would assign the copyright and intellectual property rights to the business automatically as an employee. So you've got that protection. And then, if anyone's developing anything for your company or your business, like maybe a logo or a website, or they're creating photographs for you and you want to own the copyright in those photographs, or you want to own the IP in any of those assets like the website or the logo design, you should have an IP assignment deed, which is just a simple document that transfers across ownership of those assets to the interior design business. So yeah, those are my top 5, I think.
Oh my gosh, so many questions.
I know.
You explain them really well, because they all kind of link together and they all kind of very much speak to different parts of the business.
Yeah.
The first question that I had from that was, so I kind of followed a lot of what you were saying, but there was a lot of legal jargon in there. Like, just like in our industry, there is a lot of jargon. The legal industry can be a massive amount of jargon. Like, even, you know, the client agreement, it's like, it's the contract between client and designer. And you spoke to this kind of a bit before, but it's one thing to get the document drawn up.
Yeah.
But then it's so important that the designer then takes the time to actually understand what this document is doing. And yes, you're right. Like, when you first start a business, everything is like, oh my goodness, how much money am I going to spend? But is it worthwhile taking the extra time and possibly paying the lawyer a bit more money to actually get them to explain what the documents do and how they work?
Yeah, so that's I think that's one of the things we pride ourselves here at Studio Legal. We don't just give like an off-the-shelf template, like one size fits all. I just think that's really problematic for interior designers. So we would take really detailed instructions. They get a first draft, and then they have opportunity to do 2 sets of revisions and ask questions along the way. And like, if they have a question regarding some sort of part of the law that links to their contract, we would like maybe send a couple of links for some reading resources. So the aim is, which is why it's really important to choose your lawyer wisely, but the aim is for us to make sure that the client is educated on how they should operate their business lawfully and what laws apply to them. So it's not just like walking away with a contract and writing, it's actually having a really good understanding of how their business interacts with the law and feeling confident to talk to the terms with clients. If they ask questions, they should be able to like answer them. That's sort of where we want to get them to. So I feel like this process is just such an eye-opener for interior designers if they can get the right lawyer and, as you say, spend a bit more time, a bit more money going through it properly. And
I suppose as well, it comes down to selecting the right lawyer from the start. As you mentioned, interior design is not as straightforward as what you think. There's quite, you know, different parts of the law that overlaps, that influences us, like, you know, has an effect on our industry. So actually having a lawyer that understands our industry is really important.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's quite a niche area, and I don't actually think that many people in Australia work with small businesses, and, you know, focus on this industry as one of their specialties. So yeah, it's really important to choose a lawyer that gets interior designers, gets the legal issues, but also like understands that like putting contracts in front of their clients is not an easy thing, and it has to be in plain English, and it has to look nice, and, you know, it can't be too overwhelming. There's got to be that balance, otherwise they won't sign anything, and then there'll be no contract. So yeah, you just got to get someone who gets you in your industry. It's really important, I think.
One of the other things that you mentioned was IP, and I think sometimes people are like, oh, IP, like what exactly is that kind of thing? So in the most basic level, what is IP for an interior designer?
So IP is like a collection of legal rights that apply to different types of creations. So I'll just go through the main ones. So copyright is like probably one of the main ones that interior designers will create and deal with. And that includes things like design drawings, so anything that's written down, photographs, like recordings, like sound recording. This podcast is protected by copyright, for example. Like an actual completed building is capable of being protected by copyright. So that's one big thing that interior designers should know about. And then trademarks, that's another type of IP, and that's more about your brand, the name of your business, like your logo assets. Maybe you've got a lovely slogan to describe your business. So that's trademarks. Patents, that's something that interior designers probably don't deal with as much. That's like new inventions, like a new sort of invention, a new product that's got an inventive step or part of the process. And then we've got designs which protect the way something kind of looks. Like it might be, you know, a design of a cup or a sort of a chair or something. So yeah, there's multiple types of IP, different categories, but the main thing that interior designers will deal with is copyright. So yeah.
And so with the so obviously if someone is employed by you, the work they create under that employment is covered, like that is the studio's work kind of thing. Correct. But the model of having subcontractors is growing in the industry. So where is the line between the work that is generated by the subcontractor? Where is that line between with copyright as to who owns it? Is it dictated by the level of like direction from the interior designer, or where is how is that determined?
Well, it's actually quite straightforward, which is good. So if you hire a freelancer or a contractor to work on your interior design business and to create copyright, the contractor will retain ownership of that copyright, just full stop. So you need to have that copyright transferred by the contractor in writing to your business. If there's no contract in place to transfer ownership, then the contractor will retain the ownership, but there would be this implied license for your interior design business to use it. So if the interior design business paid for the contractor's services and they delivered some copyright material, the interior designer would probably have some sort of exclusive license to use it. But that's not best practice. You should definitely make sure that if you're paying someone to deliver you some content, that you own all the rights, because one day you might want to sell your business, or you might want to bring in an investor, and they're going to want to know that your IP is secure and owned by your business.
And with that, we're really getting into the weeds here, but is that with something like a subcontractor, is that where, and I suppose it depends on how the agreement's set up, but is it a project by project thing where they need to give you the agreement of the copyright, or can it be a 6-month period?
Step back, and then I'll answer your question.
Yeah, sure.
I guess like a decision for an interior design business as to whether to hire an employee or a contractor is actually a really important one.
Yeah.
Because you can't just necessarily lawfully hire contractors to work on your business when they should be employed as employees. So that's kind of question one is like, okay, I need some support in my business. Like I want someone to help me. Do I hire them as an employee or do I hire them as a contractor?
Yeah.
So for example, if you're getting someone to work 2 days a week on your business indefinitely, same hours, and you're hiring them as a freelancer, that's probably called a sham contract.
Yeah.
It's probably not lawful.
Yeah.
And there can be some big penalties for business owners where they make that mistake and that contractor then ends up at Fair Work complaining that they never got paid leave or super or whatever it is. So that's the first decision that you need to be mindful of as an interior designer. And then if you're going to be hiring them as an employee, you need to be thinking about whether there's any like modern awards that apply to the employee.
Yeah.
So it's quite like, that's why I think, again, another important, probably the second most important issue for interior designers is hiring correctly. They can really get themselves into a pickle if they don't. So when coming back to your question about when you get a contract, so if you're going to be hiring a contractor and it's lawful and you're comfortable and you've got some advice on that, then you can have what's called like an ongoing contractor agreement. So you just sign once, and every time you want to work together on a project, you might have a sort of template email that sets out the details, or maybe there's a statement of work document or whatever you want to do in terms of a briefing process. You have that in place. And then that just kind of flows into the main contractor agreement. So you only need to sign it once, because who wants to sign like multiple contracts? Like every day you want a contract, that's not really viable. So you would just get one set up, and just like an employment agreement, you would sign that at the start and then just get going. Yeah.
Wow. There's so much. So much.
And also one more thing.
Yes. No, go.
Also, you need to be very mindful of whether or not your contractors are due superannuation. So there's a bit of a misconception, and only now I'm finding that a lot of industries are catching up, like the arts and entertainment industry for sure are catching up on whether or not a contractor needs to be paid super. So if they're essentially just providing their labour and they're not allowed to delegate their services and they're using some sort of skill, then they're probably due super. So you've got to take that into consideration as well. And then big penalties again for businesses that don't pay super to their workers. So that's another thing to be mindful of.
Yeah, wow. I mean, as you said, it is a lot more kind of, I think, to take on board than just, and I think rightly or wrongly, the people assume I'll do a subcontractor because I'm not sure what my workload is, and it does feel like that big step to take on an employee. But
what I recommend for that is a casual employment arrangement. So you just pay by the hour. They don't get leave as a casual. They get super, and then you just hire them as and when you want, casually. And then, like, obviously there's a bit of admin on the back end with paying. You've got to make sure you pay PAYE. So there's a couple of extra steps, but I think just from a business safety point of view and not the law, that's just like the best option.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, okay. So now we've got our suite of documents and we're all very organized. Now, I also think there will be quite a few designers who have like, okay, well, I've got those and they've sat in the folder that the lawyer sent them across, and they're still sitting in Dropbox and I've never downloaded them. How do you actually use those documents? Like, what is best practice for using those documents? Having the client or the supplier or the subcontractor use them on their end, and then how do you use them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is sort of something that I get a little bit concerned about. Like, I do this work for people and I'm like, are they still in Dropbox? not being used? I mean, I think getting people to sign contracts is not just for interior designers, but across the board. Like, how do you get someone to sign a contract as quickly as possible with as less pain as possible? So I think trying to find like a digital solution is a really good option. Contracts now can be accepted, and you can be bound by contract by digital signatures and by accepting, accept boxes and things like that. So, I mean, for example, at Studio Legal, we have like, it's a program, a quoting platform, and we have our quotes that pop up, and then it attaches our terms and conditions, and someone has to click accept. So I find that's a really good system, and you sort of have a track of all your quotes that are sitting like accepted or pending or in drafts, and you can attach your terms and conditions really easily. So I think creating some sort of online acceptance system is really helpful. I mean, otherwise you can put things like digital signature boxes into PDFs and have them do that quite quickly via email exchange. Yeah. Sometimes people I see put their terms and conditions into like Xero, and for example, they'll send an estimate through Xero, and then the terms and conditions will be attached, and the scope of work document or the brief will kind of be integrated into their Xero quote somehow, and then they'll accept that via Xero or like another accounting platform. So again, like at Studio Legal, we can advise people on how to digitally integrate their contract. So I think that again would be another thing worth investing in.
And
again,
with those,
not expensive, but just
like I know with a lot of the digital signature platforms, you can kind of I'm sure we've all been guilty of just scrolling to the bottom and going accept. You can sometimes highlight that clients need to like initial or kind of make sure they've actually looked at certain parts of the contract. Is that something that you kind of encourage your clients to do things like that, so that their users, like their end client, is actually understanding what they're signing? Yeah.
Sometimes I recommend like a summary of the key terms, and that could go with the proposal part. Like, hey, we need you to sign our contract. Here's a summary of the really important things you need to be aware of. And as the summary. So you can sort of highlight key things. Like you really, from an operational point of view, just want your clients to know. They don't want you you don't want to have to tell your clients down the track, hey, that's in clause 7.8.
Yeah.
And like by that stage, you're like, I didn't read that. So you can highlight things in like a box at the start of the contract or in a proposal document, or maybe in a cover email, just reiterating here's some important parts of our contract, or like our rules of engagement. So I think that's a really great idea to sort of do something extra from that's more of a client relationship kind of experience question about how to like make it as seamless as possible, and you don't want surprises like down the track. Even if you're right, it's better to let them know from the start.
And so for the designers who have been in business for a while and might have got these documents done, I don't know, 5 years ago, hopefully they're out of Dropbox by now. But how often should you be updating these documents?
Well, 10 years is definitely too long. I think probably like just rule of thumb, probably every 3 years. But if you make any operational changes to your business or your processes, if you discover issues along the way with clients and you want to change the way you do things or address issues in your terms and conditions, you should do it then. Often laws will change in Australia regarding contracts or different like elements of business operations. So you should also update your contracts when laws change, and hopefully if you've got a good lawyer, they might send you an update by email, or you could check their socials because they're usually talking about when laws change. I also think like if you have maybe a high risk job or a massive project, or it's a high fee job, or it's a year contract, and you want the comfort that your contract is tailored exactly for that job, I would invest again in like getting it tailored and populated with a lawyer just on that project as well. Like if none of those things happen, maybe every 3 years you want to get your lawyer to say, hey, is there anything I should be changing here? Otherwise, you need to be proactive, and it should be like a living document. It's kind of like it should evolve, and I know it's all good, and
it all sounds so good, and I'm like,
it sounds what what's the saying, all good and well, or something. But
okay. So now we've we have talked about the way employees can help employers can help protect themselves with subcontractors, employees when it comes to copyright and IP. What are some of the other ways that studio owners should be thinking about in terms of the legal side of stuff when they are growing their team? Like, it can be quite a daunting time. It sounds, really exciting, but then you're like, oh my goodness. And there are so many, you touched on it before, like super and tax and all of that kind of stuff that is so important to be getting right. What are some of the other things that studio owners need to be mindful of when they are taking on employees or subcontractors?
Yeah, so obviously we talked about IP, we talked about super, we've talked about whether they're an employer or a contractor, super important. I guess another thing is like work cover insurance. You need to be making sure you've got the right work cover for your state and for your business. That's really important. And another thing is having, I recommend, as the team is built out a bit more, having a staff handbook of policies and procedures.
Yeah.
So, for example, that might deal with like a sexual harassment policy or a privacy policy, like how does the business deal with personal information, which is a really hot topic at the moment.
Yeah.
Social media posting, like who's allowed to post online? Is it the opinion of the practice or theirs, or like what are the rules?
Yeah.
So yeah, a handbook is really important. And that would also deal with like how do you deal with grievances or like, leave requests, all of those sorts of things. So, and if a business has a set of policies and procedures that have been clearly outlined to the staff members and something happens, maybe in privacy or a sexual harassment issue, and at least you've got a policy, that's going to help you a lot more to show that you've exercised your duty of care in relation to your business. But if you don't have any, then that's just, you just don't have any. So that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
I think that would be my key other two, apart from getting contracting right, IP, super. I might have missed something, but they are what comes to mind.
Yeah. And I suppose it's it all kind of reflects on the fact that if you are growing your team, there becomes more kind of scaffolding around it that you need to put in place, which is what these legal documents are. They're like the scaffolding to build a strong business. And it does
foundations.
Yeah, and it does sound a bit, like overwhelming at start, but I think for anyone who's been through or been in a business where things have gone pear-shaped, whether it be a grievance or, a client's gone, like something's happened, you very quickly realize how important these documents are.
That's so spot on.
Yeah.
I do see a lot of people, they're a bit cocky, not in a bad way. It's good. I'm like, great, nothing's happened to you. You're like, I can never let you see that, nothing's ever happened to me. And then I see other clients that have had they haven't slept for like a month. They are so stressed, they almost want to give up. They have so much anxiety. And it's, if they just kind of had some of the stuff sorted out at the start, they would, I think it's about being out of control. Like if you don't have these things in place and you're not confident as to what the documents say or that you've covered off and everything, kind of in the unknown with the law.
Yeah.
And often you can maybe even think you're in a worse off position than you are.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know.
Yeah.
So, I think it's just really important to get these things sorted, and hopefully you never use them, and that's great. Best case scenario, you pay this money for this work. You have a lawyer you contact and sometimes pay for advice, and nothing happens. That's great. But
and I think also the thing that is really important for business owners to understand is that it's actually about, it's about creating these documents, which is really important, but it's actually about forming the relationship with the lawyer or the accountant or whoever the other professional service is that you're engaging. Because when stuff does go a bit pear-shaped, you don't want to be cold calling, whoever the first one that came up on your Google search for the lawyer in your area. Like, you want to know that the person you're talking to understands your business, understands the area of work that we're doing, and understands you, so that you can be reassured about the advice you're getting, because there's nothing worse than when you're kind of in the middle of it.
Absolutely. And that's what we say, like you want your accountant and your lawyer, and ideally an insurance broker. I think are the sort of holy
Yeah.
of advisors. And you want someone that you can just literally call up for 5 minutes, and
Yeah.
they're not going to put the clock on. They're just going to like, yeah, I'll take your call. What's going on? Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you need to do this work. This is how much it's going to cost. Or like, that's fine. Don't worry about it. That's nothing.
Yeah.
You know, come back to me if this happens. So you
Yeah.
want that relationship. And I mean, I'm a business owner myself, so it's just about peace of mind. And like I've had, you know, over the years had a few issues myself, and I've decided to hire another lawyer, even though I kind of know the law in the space. And it's the best money I've ever spent, just having someone in your court, and having the peace of mind as a business owner that you're doing it right, and that you're mitigating any loss or risk.
Exactly. And it's so true. It's like having someone in your corner. And so often as well, I think, especially if it's a legal thing, like maybe accounting as well, but as the person it's happening to, you can be very emotional about it all. And so having someone who's that kind of emotionally detached, kind of reading the room for you and navigating the situation is just so helpful.
Yeah, and I've seen it all before, and they'll probably be like, this is like a 1 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is nothing.
Yeah. So
So that's, I think it's such an important thing to remember. Like it's so much more than just the documents. Like it's really
totally
starting that working relationship and, you know, keeping that working relationship going. So one of the hot topics in our industry at the moment is I think it's an age-old topic. So one of the things that we create a lot of is, obviously, we love to photograph our work. It's how we show off our work. It's how we grow our what's the word I'm looking for? It's how we grow our businesses. But with social media and how people share and, you know, repost and all that kind of stuff, it can be a bit of a muddy kind of area around, should you repost other people's work? How do you credit them? What is the right way of doing it? Is there a wrong way of doing it? What's kind of the legal take on this?
Yeah. So generally, as a rule of thumb, you should be getting permission from the copyright owner of the photos before you post the photo on your Instagram or other social platforms, or before you reshare someone's photo. There's some exceptions under the Copyright Act, like if you're reporting the news or like it's an education purpose, but that's sort of quite complicated. So let's just put the exceptions aside. So generally, you should get permission. So then you need to work out like, who is actually the copyright owner of the photo, because often you just actually won't know. Like it could still be the photographer, because as I spoke to you before, like contractors retain the IP unless it's transferred. So it could be the copyright owner could be the photographer, or it could be the other business, because the copyright might have been transferred to the business. So you need to be thinking about who you would get permission from, and you shouldn't be posting unless you have permission of the copyright owner. So say if the copyright owner was the photographer, so what I would be doing is I'd be contacting the business to say, hey, I'd love to share this image, and we do this on our own socials. Love to share this image for this purpose. Do we have your consent? And get them to DM you back. And I would also say, is there a photographer that owns the copyright in the photograph? Could I get in contact with them, or would you mind getting their consent as well? And they might say, oh, we own the photos, that's is not required. Or they might go, yeah, actually this photographer still owns the photos, you should contact them too. So you would get that permission, and a DM on Instagram is sufficient. As long as it's in writing, you can show evidence that that's happened. And then you need to put a credit to the photographer, I would say. And again, when you're checking in on the permissions, I would also say, do you want to be credited? How would you like to be credited? I would be saying that to both the business and the photographer, if there was a photographer as well. So then you put the correct credit in the post, and then you should be good.
And then so many questions from that. I think the whole crediting of creatives and all people involved in the project is so confusing and interesting, and something that seems quite straightforward, but yet we seem to be tripping over our feet all the time in the industry. And to step it back a little bit, when an interior designer engages a photographer to shoot their work, and I've seen contracts and, worked with different photographers where I've seen it both ways kind of thing. And I've even seen it on like branding shoots or like, so not necessarily like project photography, where the photographer has retained the copyright to the images. How does an interior designer navigate that? Is that the norm? Is that okay? Should they be asking for the transfer of copyright to them? Like, how do you navigate that?
So if I'm looking after the interior designer, not the photographer, I have to both from time to time. So I would be saying to the interior designer, if you're commissioning a photographer to take commercial photography, you should definitely be asking to own the copyright in the photographs, and that you have, full rights to do whatever you want to do with those images, including putting them on social media, on your website, on a banner if you wanted to, like whatever you want. And then, that needs to go into a contract as well. So when I was talking about the IP assignment document above, or this a contractor agreement, you could use one of those to get the rights.
And is the key to that you have paid the photographer? Like there's an exchange of money?
Well, it really becomes a negotiation between the photographer and the business as to the rights. So even if you say to the photographer, I want to own them, they might go, my policy is I don't transfer copyright. So if you want to use me, I'm the copyright owner, I'll give you a license to use them for X, Y, and Z purpose. And then it becomes a discussion about what's the terms of the license. How broad is the license? Is it like unlimited? That would be the next case, best case for the interior designer. If the photographer retained copyright, then the interior design business would want unlimited rights to use the images. Subject to them being credited, like the photographer being credited. So that would be the next best situation. But then the photographer again might go, oh, no, you're only allowed to use that on your Instagram. You're only allowed to use it for 2 years, and then you must come back to me for another fee. So it becomes a negotiation. So I think what you need to do as an interior designer is find a photographer that's willing to work with you in the manner that you need. And I'm sure there's a lot of them out there that are comfortable transferring the copyright and granting unlimited rights for social media or online use or something.
And does it can it work in the flip, in that you say the photographer's like, no, I'm not willing to transfer the copyright over to you, but you can have this limited use. As the interior designer, can you say to the photographer, I'm not happy for them to be used, like you can't go and use those images wherever you like? Like, is there a reverse agreement?
Well, that would come into the negotiation. So as an interior designer, you would certainly at all times be saying, I have exclusive rights to use the photos. And the photographer certainly doesn't, and third parties certainly don't. The only thing the photographer might want to carve out is that they can use it for promotional purposes, like on their portfolio or like client kind of testimonial pages or something, for self-promotional purposes. But you would certainly want to make sure in your contract, again, it could be an email, just a few points that can be contract exchanged and agreed by email, that you're the only one to be able to use them. Once again, something that's quite seems straightforward, but it's actually not. And there's another really interesting kind of point as well that I just wanted to talk about it. So another scenario could be that you go to the photographer and ask the photographer to use a photo that they own. Maybe it's on their Instagram, but it relates to another business's work, location, product design. And then if you just get permission from the photographer, who's the copyright owner, and you don't get permission from the business or the location or the designer or something, or the model or whoever's being photographed, then that can be another issue. Even though that third party doesn't own the copyright, there's a whole body of law around like engaging in misleading and deceptive conduct or passing off on the reputation of somebody else. So if an interior design business decided to use a photographer's photo with their permission, but it had content in it from another business or a talent or someone like that, and they don't have their permission as well, there could be this like false misrepresentation that there's an affiliation, which there is not.
Yeah.
So the business or the third party might also bring a legal claim against the interior design business. So I think I've been seeing a lot of talk about like you can't just post other people's work because it looks like your own.
Yes.
So that's sort of separate to the whole copyright question. It's more like moving into like misleading, deceptive conduct, passing off, which is other areas of law which you need to be aware of when you're using images. Yeah. So just get permission from everyone who's possibly to do with the photo, or don't use it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so complicated. And yeah, I think you see people doing it really well on Instagram, and then you see people who are like, no, that's not how it should be.
Yeah.
The other thing when it comes to photography and all that kind of stuff is so often, you know, it comes into awards and magazines and all that kind of stuff. How, from a legal perspective, how do people, what's the right way of crediting people who might have been involved in the project or the builder or the architect or whoever kind of thing? Like, how do you navigate that? Because I've seen that go awry as well.
Yeah, me too. And this is one of my favorite areas of working with architects and interior designers, when they have like an attribution fight.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess obviously if you're entering in your project into an award or some sort of prize, or you're using it for promotional purposes, you should get the copyright owner's permission to use images and videos and things. But then if you're working together on a project, say with another interior designer, like you're co-designing, or you've got working with an architect or a builder or whoever, then it's always a good idea at the very start of working with someone on a project that you all sit down and go, okay, so how's this project going to be attributed in the media for publicity purposes if it goes into an award? Like, is it, if say if there's two interior designers working on a massive project, for example, you know, is it interior designer one first or second? Like, who's kind of, because sometimes, you know, it will seem like the more important one is first. So, and, you know, just numbing out how that project will be credited from the very start is really important and can save a lot of fights down the track. And they do pop up.
And it's good to get that stuff started in the honeymoon phase of the project, where everyone still likes each other and the wheels haven't really fallen off, and, you know, everyone's still talking to each other.
Yeah, great. And also, like, as interior designers and architects, with regards to like builders and developers, like insisting in terms their contracts, your contracts with them, that the builders and the developers actually credit you for your work. Yeah. Because often that will be deleted out of the design services contract, that they don't have to like credit architects or interior designers or anyone. Yeah. So making sure that that's put in place as well with the builders and construction companies is really important. Yeah. Wow.
That's so true, because you know, so often, especially with these big developments, and they're beautiful kind of thing, and there's no credit to who actually designed it. So
yeah, exactly.
So important to get that right.
Yeah.
So I think we've touched on this a little bit, but just to kind of, I suppose, what are some things if an interior designer is thinking of engaging a lawyer, they've listened to this and they're like, oh my goodness, I need to get myself organized. What are some of the key things an interior designer should look for when they're looking for the lawyer?
Well, obviously having specific expertise in dealing with clients in the architecture and interior design space would be number one. So sometimes lawyers might be construction lawyers, but they might actually not really deal with interior designers, which can be quite different. Well, it's very different to construction company legals. So making sure they've got industry experience. I think also making sure that, that they're, I don't know, just the approach of the firm resonates with the interior designer, like the look and feel of how they do things, maybe their website, because sometimes you can go to a lawyer and they can be super corporate and their documents are really long and they don't really know how to write a short contract or something simple. So you can actually end up spending a lot of money and just getting something that you're like, I couldn't use this. So I guess like when you're, you know, you should be able to have like a complimentary discovery call with the lawyer just to see if this is going to be a good fit. You should always be able to, like I said, speak to someone before you engage them who can talk you through their process and how they work. And I guess to see if they're a good fit. You should quickly be able to find that out because they'll speak your language. And, you know, otherwise, I mean, lawyers can be really dry and really kind of unrelatable. So I get that. So,
and I suppose as well, like, I mean, I think, you know, I've had experience with engaging professional services, and I always feel like if I walk out of the first meeting going, okay, I understood what they said, I felt like I was talking to an equal, like you get a vibe. Like if you walk out of the first meeting and you're like, I don't know what they just said for the last 20 minutes, it's most probably not the right fit.
Totally. Yeah, you've got to get that vibe going. And you have to want to feel like they really want to help you and they're really into what you do.
Yeah.
And then you've got to think about like price points as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got top tier firms, we've got mid-tier firms, and we've got boutique firms. So you just got to think about your budget as well. So that's another consideration.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So tell me, what are you looking forward to in your business over the next 12 months?
Well, obviously, firstly, looking forward to a really lovely break. I'm take 4 weeks in New Zealand, which is where I'm originally from.
Oh, very cool.
And then I think everyone is feeling like this. I just really want the economy to settle down and for work to just like, for businesses to start booming again and my clients' businesses to be like, you know, we've got too much work.
Yeah.
We can't keep up. Not like we're sort of scrambling to try and get, you know, to our budgets and stuff.
Yeah.
I just want the economy to like really help businesses thrive, because it's obviously been 3 years of pretty challenging times for business owners, and that would be what I'm just manifesting I'm manifesting to everyone.
I really like that. I think there's a lot of people listening to that will be like, hell yeah, like
I'm just like, Studio Legal is going to have its biggest year next year, and all my clients are, because if I have a big year, my clients have a
year. Exactly.
So that's good. And we're looking to grow out our team in Sydney, and looking to start. I want to start doing some video content. I've just kind of been doing written content, and I know I need to be out there on YouTube or like, I don't know, Reels or TikTok or something. So I'm going to that's my personal goal, to like get myself out there. Get my face out there.
It sounds like
better or worse.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like a great 2024. And how can our community reach out and find you?
Great. Well, we do a lot of work we post a lot on Instagram. We have some really great legal content on Instagram. So we're at Studio Legal. And then we obviously have our website, which is www.studiolegal.com.au, and our inquiry email is hello@studiolegal.com.au. So you can reach out on any of those forums, and we give complimentary 15-minute consultations. So we're able to just have a chat about an interior designer's business and what they might need, give complimentary quotes and proposals to the clients, and then hopefully do some work together. Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds so great.
From your listeners. Yeah.
And we will link to all of those details in the show notes. Jennifer, thank you so much. I really could have asked you a lot more questions, but
we could have went on for hours, but we would have bored everyone.
I know. I'm like, there is a point where we're too far in the weeds. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this design dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next Design Dialogue.